There was a sound on a black front porch in 1954 that doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't loud. It was the creak of a porch swing, slow and steady, while a young man sat with his hat in his lap and his hands folded, waiting, not for a kiss, not for a phone number, but for a daddy to come outside and look him dead in the eye. That creak, family, was the sound of patience, the sound of respect being earned one squeak at a time. And if you didn't grow up in that world, you have no idea how much was riding on that porch swing. Because back then, love didn't just happen between two young people. Love had to walk through a whole family first. It had to pass a mama's eyes and a daddy's silence and a big mama's from the kitchen window. By the time two people were officially talking, half the block already knew, and most of them had an opinion. Nothing about courting was private. And the strange thing is, that's exactly why it lasted. Today we're going to walk through 30 of those rules, the ones nobody writes down anymore because nobody's living by them anymore. Some of these will make you smile. Some of these are going to hit you right in the chest because you remember somebody who lived this way. Your mama, your auntie, your own grandparents. Stay with me, family. By the time we get to the end of this list, you're going to understand something about love that this generation never got the chance to learn. Hey family, I'm James. And today we're stepping back into 1950s courtship. The front porches, the church socials, the long walks home with somebody's daddy timing you from the window. Now before we get into it, if you're new here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We're building something here. A place where we remember the way things used to be done and the way they made love mean something. So go on, hit subscribe, ring that little bell, and let's get into number 1. Number 1. Asking daddy first. Before a young man ever took a young lady anywhere, he had to sit across from her father, sometimes on that very porch, sometimes at the kitchen table with a glass of sweet tea he was too nervous to drink, and ask permission. Not to marry her, just to court her, to walk with her to the corner store, to sit next to her at the picture show. Her daddy might ask him where he worked, might ask him did he go to church, might just look at him a long, long time before saying one word. Big Mama used to say, a man who won't face your daddy ain't ready to face your life. That wasn't about control, family. That was about a father making sure the man standing in front of him understood the weight of what he was asking for. Nobody walks up to a porch like that anymore. Nobody has to. Number 2. The front porch rule. Courting didn't happen behind closed doors. It happened in plain sight, on the porch, where Mama could see through the screen door and the neighbors could see from theirs. The porch was the whole relationship in those early weeks. Talking, laughing, maybe holding a paper fan between you on a hot evening, never once going inside unless somebody's mother said it was all right. The porch protected both of them. It protected her reputation, and it protected his intentions. You couldn't claim you didn't mean anything by it when half the street watched you sit there every Sunday for a month straight. Number 3. Sunday best, every single time. A young man did not show up to court a young lady in his work clothes. He pressed his trousers. He shined his shoes till you could see the porch light bounce off the toe. He wore his good hat, the one he saved for church and funerals, because courting a woman was treated with that same seriousness. Looking sharp wasn't vanity back then. It was respect, plain and simple. It said, I thought about you before I left my house. Folks don't dress for love like that anymore, and that's a shame. Number 4, the chaperone. A young couple rarely went anywhere alone in the early stages. A little sister tagging along to the corner store. An auntie sitting 2 pews back at the revival. A cousin riding in the back seat on the way to the fish fry. It wasn't there to ruin the romance. It was there to protect it. It kept things slow. It kept things honest. Back in those days, a chaperone was just as much a part of dating as the date itself, and nobody thought twice about it. Number 5. Walking her home every time. No exceptions. A young man did not let a young lady walk home in the dark by herself. Not from church, not from a dance, not from her girlfriend's house 2 streets over. He walked her hat in hand, making easy conversation, dropping her at her door and waiting until she was safely inside before he turned to go. My granddaddy walked my grandmother home every single night for 8 months before he ever asked to court her properly. 8 months of walking and not one single complaint. Number 6. The letter-writing courtship. If a young man lived in another town or got sent off to work the rail lines or was stationed somewhere with the service, courting continued through the mail. Long letters written slow, words chosen carefully because you only had one page and you wanted it to count. Some women kept every single letter tied up with ribbon for 60 years. That ribbon family was a love story you could hold in your hands. Now, before we keep going, I want to hear from you, family. Out of everything we've covered so far, which one of these rules sounds the most foreign to you today? Drop it in the comments and tell me, did your grandparents follow this rule? Or did they break it and tell you the story themselves? I read every single comment, and I promise you, somebody out there has a story that'll make the rest of us smile. Number 7. No holding hands until it was official. Holding hands in public meant something. It wasn't a casual gesture. It was a declaration. A young couple might court for weeks, even months, before they ever walked down the street with fingers laced together, because that small act told the whole community. This is serious now. Folks would notice. Somebody's auntie would call somebody's mother that same evening. You held hands when you meant it, not before. Number 8. The traffic side walk. A man always walked on the side of the sidewalk closest to the street. Always. It came from an old custom, keeping the lady away from splashing puddles, away from passing carriages, away from anything in the road that might startle or harm her. By the 1950s, it had nothing to do with carriages anymore, but the habit stayed because it was never really about the street. It was about a man showing, without saying a word, that he'd put himself between her and anything that might come her way. Number 9. Bringing something for the house. A young man didn't show up empty-handed. Maybe a small sack of peaches from the produce stand. Maybe a jar of preserves his own mother put up. Maybe just a bundle of wildflowers picked from the side of the road on his walkover. It wasn't about the gift itself. It was a gesture toward her whole household, toward her mother, who'd be feeding him soon enough, and toward the family he was hoping eventually to become part of. Number 10. Meeting at the church social. Church wasn't just where you prayed, it was where you met. The Sunday socials, the youth choir rehearsals, the picnic on the church grounds after the second service. These were the spaces where young men and women were allowed to talk, laugh, and get to know each other under the watchful, approving eye of the whole congregation. Big Mama used to say, the church social was God's own matchmaking service, and half the marriages on our block started exactly that way. Number 11. The porch light curfew. Every front porch had a light, and every light had a meaning. When that porch light came on, it was time to wrap things up. No negotiation, no extra 5 minutes. A young man knew that light better than he knew his own watch. He understood that the moment it clicked on, her daddy was telling him, without a word, that visiting hours were over. You won't see that today. Today, a curfew is a text message. Back then, it was a single bulb burning on a porch ceiling, and it never lied. Number 12. Double dating. Especially in the early stages, two young couples often went out together, to the picture show, to a dance, to a Sunday drive if somebody had access to a car. It made things easier on everybody. It gave a young woman a friend close by if things felt uncertain, and it gave the young men somebody to talk to so the silences didn't feel so heavy. Plenty of lifelong friendships were built sitting in the back row of a movie theater on somebody else's double date. Number 13. The Sunday dinner introduction. Once things were serious enough, a young man was invited, formally invited, mind you, to Sunday dinner. This was no small thing. This meant sitting at the family table, passing the dishes the right way, complimenting the cooking without overdoing it, answering questions from uncles who asked them just to see how he'd handle the pressure. If he made it through dinner and Big Mama offered him a second helping without being asked, that was as good as a blessing. Number 14. Calling on a young lady. Calling on? Somebody wasn't the same as dating somebody casually. It meant a young man had declared his intentions formally to her family, and he was now permitted to visit on a regular schedule, usually Sunday afternoons, sometimes a weekday evening if her parents allowed it. It was structured, it was respectful, and everybody on the block knew exactly what it meant when they saw the same young man's hat on that same porch week after week. Number 15. The juke joint dance floor. Now, not every courtship happened on a church pew. Plenty of romances started on a Saturday night dance floor, the band playing something with a little grit to it, couples moving close but careful, watched over by older women sitting along the wall who'd seen every trick a young man might try and weren't fooled by a single one of them. A man who could dance well and treat a woman with respect on that floor at the same time. That man had something. Folks noticed. Now, family, let me tell you something real quick. These traditions I'm sharing with you today, they're a piece of what we almost lost. I put together something called the Soul Roots Cookbook, 100 Forgotten Black American Recipes, written out the way Big Mama would have made them. Complete, patient, and true. The very dishes that were served at those Sunday courting dinners we just talked about. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. You can also scan that code on your screen right now. Don't let these recipes disappear the way so much of this courting culture already has. Number 16. Saving for the ring before you ever asked. A man didn't propose with empty pockets and a promise. He worked, sometimes for years, putting money aside before he ever bought a ring or said a word about marriage. My granddaddy worked 6 days a week and never once complained. And part of what he was working for, quietly, was a small gold band he kept hidden in his sock drawer for almost 2 years before he finally asked my grandmother's father for her hand. Number 17. The family reunion test. If a courtship lasted long enough to survive a family reunion, it was considered serious. Bringing a young man or woman to meet the whole extended family, the cousins, the great-aunts, the uncles who'd asked too many questions over a card game, was a kind of trial by fire. If you could survive an afternoon of that, with everybody studying you over potato salad and dominoes, you'd proven something real. Number 18. Writing her name in your book. Some young men kept a small notebook, not a diary, nothing fancy, where they wrote down little things. The day they met her, her favorite hymn, what she said the first time she really laughed. It wasn't romantic in the way we'd call romantic now. It was careful, deliberate. A young man keeping record of a woman he intended to remember for the rest of his life, whether things worked out or not. Number 19. Getting Big Mama's blessing. In a lot of houses, the real approval didn't come from Daddy. It came from Big Mama. She'd watch a young man longer than anybody. Watch how he treated his own mother. Watch whether he looked you in the eye or down at his shoes. Watch what he did when nobody was performing for him. And when Big Mama finally nodded, just once, over a plate of food she'd handed him without being asked, that was the real green light. Daddy might say yes, but Big Mama's yes was the one that mattered most. Number 20. The good morning visit. On Sunday mornings before church, a young man courting a young lady seriously might stop by her house just to say good morning. Not to stay, not to linger, just to be seen walking her and her family to church together. It was a small gesture, but it told the whole street something. This young man wasn't hiding anything. He wanted to be seen standing beside her, in the daylight, on the way to the Lord's house. Now, real quick, family, I want you to think about your own people for a second. Who in your family met their husband or wife exactly the way we've been talking about? Through the church, through a chaperone, through a daddy giving his blessing on a porch? Tell me about them in the comments. I read every single one, and I promise you, somebody's story is going to remind another one of us of somebody we lost. Number 21. Courting through the mail across the distance. When a young man got drafted or shipped off for work on the railroad lines up north, courting didn't stop. It just changed shape. Letters crossed hundreds of miles, sometimes taking weeks to arrive, each one read over and over until the creases in the paper went soft. Some women waited 2-3 years for a man to come home. with nothing but those letters to hold on to. And when he finally walked back up that porch, the whole neighborhood came out to watch. Number 22. The talking stage had rules too. Before a couple was officially courting, there was a quieter season called talking. It wasn't loose the way it sometimes gets treated today. Talking meant a young man and woman had an understanding. They weren't seeing anybody else, even if nothing had been formally announced yet. It was a season of feeling things out, carefully, with both people understanding that talking was a step towards something, not a free pass to drift without direction. Number 23. Bringing a gift to her mother, not just to her. A wise young man understood that winning a young lady's heart meant nothing if her mother didn't approve of him. So sometimes the flowers, the preserves, the small kindness. It was aimed at her mother just as much as her. A young man who remembered her mother's birthday, who asked after her health, who complimented her cooking honestly and specifically. That man understood something most young people miss today. You don't just court the woman. You court the whole family she comes from. This right here, this is something we need to bring back. Now, family, you've been here with me through most of this video, and that tells me something about you. It tells me you understand that what we're talking about isn't just old-fashioned dating advice. It's a record of how love used to be protected by patience, by family, by a whole community standing watch over something precious. I know some of you are thinking, I'll ask my mama how she met my daddy one of these days. I'll write it down eventually. Family, I've been doing this long enough to know that one of these days sometimes never comes. That's why I put together the Soul Roots Cookbook, 100 recipes, written out complete, the way Big Mama made them, with every tip and every secret included. The same dishes that filled the kitchens during the courtships we've been talking about all video long. You can keep relying on memory alone, or you can have it all in one place, preserved the right way, starting today. The link is in the description and pinned right up top in the comments. Scan the code on your screen if that's easier. I did my part. The rest is yours. Number 24. The waiting period before marriage. Even after an engagement was announced, couples didn't rush to the altar. There was almost always a waiting period, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a full year, used to save money, plan properly, and let both families settle into the idea. It wasn't about doubt. It was about doing things in order, the right way, with the church and the family fully prepared to celebrate when the day finally came. Number 25. Dressing for her family, not just for her. Every time a young man came courting, he dressed as if her whole family was watching, because they usually were. A wrinkled shirt or a missing button didn't just reflect on him. It reflected on how seriously he took the whole household he was trying to be welcomed into. Looking sharp every single time was a quiet promise. I will always show up prepared for you and yours. Number 26. The neighborhood watched you, and that was the point. There was no privacy in courting, and that wasn't a flaw. It was the design. Everybody on the block knew who was courting who, how long it had been going, whether the young man had met the family yet. That visibility kept young people accountable. You couldn't disappear, couldn't play games, couldn't string somebody along quietly, because the whole community was watching and the whole community would talk. Number 27. Asking for her hand, not just proposing to her. Before a man ever got down on one knee in front of the woman he loved, he had a separate, quieter conversation with her father, sometimes with her mother too, asking for permission to marry their daughter. The proposal to her was the celebration. The conversation with her family was the foundation. Folks don't do this anymore, and that's a shame, because that conversation meant the families were already united before the wedding day ever came. If everything we've talked about today brought back a memory for you, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you're here with us every single time we do this. And drop a comment for me. Tell me the story of how your own grandparents or your parents came together, courted, and built a life. I read every single one, family, and your stories are the reason this channel exists. Number 28. The wedding was a community event, not a private one. A wedding in those days wasn't just for the two families involved. The whole neighborhood, the whole congregation came together. The women cooking for days beforehand, the men setting up chairs and tables, children running between the legs of grown folks dressed in their absolute best. Nobody paid a caterer. Nobody hired a planner. The community built the wedding with their own hands, because the marriage belonged to all of them, not just to the bride and groom. Number 29. The first dance was witnessed, not performed. When a newly married couple took their first dance, it wasn't choreographed for an audience the way it sometimes is now. It was watched closely by everybody who'd had a hand in getting them to that day. The daddy who gave his blessing on the porch, the big mama who nodded her approval months before anybody else did, the chaperones, the church mothers, the whole long chain of people who'd protected that love until it was strong enough to stand on its own. Number 30. The blessing that followed them after the wedding. Even after the wedding was over, the watching didn't stop, not entirely. Mothers checked in. Fathers asked how the young husband was treating their daughter. The church kept that young couple close, prayed for them by name, expected to see them in the same pew the following Sunday. Courting in those days didn't end at the altar. It simply changed shape into something the whole community kept tending to, long after the wedding clothes were folded away. You know, family, when I sit back and think about all 30 of these rules, I keep coming back to one thing. None of this was ever really about romance moving slow for the sake of being old-fashioned. It was about a whole community making sure love had to prove itself before anybody trusted it with somebody's daughter, somebody's son, somebody's future. The porches, the chaperones, the letters, the waiting. Every single one of those rules was a kind of protection, a way of saying, before we hand you our most precious thing, we need to see that you understand the weight of it. We lost a lot of that, family. We traded the porch for a phone screen. We traded the chaperone for nothing at all. And I think a lot of young people today are out here looking for love without anybody ever teaching them the patience it takes to build something that lasts. That's not their fault. Nobody showed them. That's why we do what we do here. Not to shame anybody for how things are now, but to remind all of us what love used to require, back when a whole community stood watch over it. Share this one with somebody in your family who still talks about how their mama and daddy met. Somebody who's never sat down and told that whole story from start to finish. This might be the nudge they need to finally tell it. Subscribe, because next time we're going somewhere just as real as today. I'll see you next time, family.